I never imagined it would end like this. The day was like any other, warm sunlight filtering through the curtains, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. But as I walked into the kitchen, I noticed something odd. A sleek, brand new coffee maker sat on the counter, a model I couldn't recall buying. My wife Anna stood nearby, humming softly, her back turned as she arranged a fruit bowl. "Where did this come from?" I asked, gesturing at the machine. Her movements faltered just slightly before she turned with a smile. "Oh, that. The neighbor lent it to us. Ours was getting old, remember?" I nodded, but something about her tone tugged at me. It wasn't the explanation. It was her avoidance of my gaze, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter just a bit too tightly. The moment passed quickly, with Anna gliding into another topic, but it planted a seed of doubt in my mind. The neighbor, Mark. He was wealthy, charming, and always offering a hand. At first, I appreciated his generosity, fixing our leaking faucet, lending us tools, even watching our dog once while we were out of town. But lately his presence in our lives felt omnipresent, as if he were more than just the man next door. Later that evening, as Anna tidied up the living room, I noticed something else. A slim, gold bracelet sparkling faintly on the coffee table. It wasn't hers, I knew that much. She didn't wear gold jewelry, always claiming it didn't suit her. "Whose is this?" I asked, holding it up. She froze for a fraction of a second, then turned to me, her expression smooth. "Oh, that. Mark's wife have left it when she came by last week. I forgot to give it back." I nodded again, but this time I didn't let it go so easily. My eyes lingered on the bracelet as unease crept over me. Something wasn't adding up, and I needed to find out what. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and out of instinct, I glanced at the screen. A message preview popped up. "Can't wait to see you again. Tonight, same time." My chest tightened as I looked away, my mind racing. It wasn't damning by itself, but it wasn't innocent either. Anna's voice called out from the hallway. "Honey, what are you doing in there?" I swallowed hard, pocketing the suspicion for now. But I knew the answers wouldn't stay hidden for long. The next morning, I decided to shake off the tension from the night before and approach the day as normal as possible. Anna was already up, sipping coffee by the window. Her hair was pulled back, and she looked serene, almost too serene, as if nothing had happened. "I'm heading to Mark's later," she said casually, not even glancing in my direction. "She's lending us a new ladder for the gutters." I nodded slowly, watching her. "You've been spending a lot of time over there lately." She finally turned to me, her brow furrowed. "He's just helping out, that's all." "Why? Does it bother you?" Her tone was calm, almost defensive, but the question felt like a challenge. I forced a smile and shook my head. "No, not at all. It's just he's very generous. More than most neighbors, don't you think?" She shrugged and placed her mug on the counter. "He's just being kind. You'd know that if you talked to him more." I decided to let the conversation drop, but the unease remained. Later, as Anna left to go to Mark's, I watched her from the window. She was dressed casually, but her jeans fit just a little too perfectly, and her steps were lighter than usual. As soon as the door closed behind her, I grabbed her phone, still sitting on the kitchen table. My hands shook slightly as I navigated through her messages. Most were harmless. Exchanges with her friends, reminders for grocery lists. But then I found one thread that was marked as work in her contacts. It wasn't work. The thread was brief but revealing. "Anna, thank you again for yesterday. It's always so good to see you. Work anything for you. Same time tomorrow, and of course, I'll be there." My chest tightened as I read and reread the messages. They were careful not to include names, but the implications were clear. I had my suspicions before, but now they were solidifying into something I couldn't ignore. When she returned later, carrying the ladder Mark had promised, I studied her carefully. She seemed relaxed, even cheerful, as if she had no idea the walls were beginning to close in. "Mark sends his regards," she said, setting the ladder against the garage. "He mentioned wanting to invite us over for dinner soon." "Oh, that's nice of him," I said, forcing the words out evenly. "Maybe we should take him up on that." She glanced at me, her smile faint and unreadable. "Sure. Why not?" I knew then that I needed to see Mark myself. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't about to let it continue without answers. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. That afternoon, as I stood in the yard pretending to trim the hedge, I saw Mark outside, tinkering with his car. His driveway was immaculate. His car a polished luxury sedan that gleamed in the sun. He didn't seem like a man who got his hands dirty, but there he was, sleeves rolled up, engrossed in whatever he was doing. I walked over, casual but purposeful. "Need a hand?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Mark looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled broadly. "Hey, neighbor! No, just checking the oil." These things are picky sometimes. I nodded, leaning casually against the fence. "I've been meaning to thank you for all the help you've been giving us. Anna keeps mentioning how much you've done for us." His smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. "Oh, it's nothing," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "You guys are great neighbors. It's nice to be able to help out." I let the silence hang for a moment, watching him carefully. He didn't flinch under my gaze, but there was a practiced smoothness to his demeanor, like a salesman who knew exactly how to disarm a skeptical customer. "Hannah's been over a lot lately," I said, testing the waters. "You two must be getting along pretty well." Mark straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "She's great company. You're a lucky guy." The way he said it was almost too sincere, too deliberate. "Yeah, I am," I replied, my voice tightening slightly. "Lucky to have a neighbor like you, too. Not many people go out of their way the way you do." He chuckled, tossing the rag onto the hood of his car. "What can I say? I like to help." Something about the way he said it grated on me, but I forced a smile and nodded. "Well, if you ever need anything, let me know. Gotta return the favor sometime." Mark clapped me on the shoulder, his hand lingering just a fraction too long. I'll keep that in mind. As I walked back to my yard, I could feel his eyes on me. There was no outright admission, no slip of the tongue, but the interaction left a sour taste in my mouth. He was too confident, too comfortable. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to stoke the fire burning in my chest. That night, as Anna prepared dinner, I couldn't shake the memory of Mark's smile. "So, when are we having dinner with Mark?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She hesitated, just for a second. "I don't know. He hasn't set a date yet." "Maybe we should pick one," I said, watching her carefully. "Would be nice to spend more time with him. You seem to enjoy his company." She glanced at me, her eyes searching mine for something. "Sure, I'll ask him next time I see him." "Good," I said, my voice firm. "I'm looking forward to it." As the words left my mouth, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. If there were answers to be found, dinner at Mark's house might just bring them into the light. The dinner invitation came quicker than expected. 2 days later, Anna casually mentioned over breakfast that Mark had invited us to his house that Friday evening. Her tone was light, but her fingers fidgeted with her coffee mug, a habit I'd come to recognize when she was nervous. "That's great," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What's the occasion?" "Nothing special," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "He just thought it'd be nice to have us over." I nodded, hiding my unease. "Sounds good. I'll bring a bottle of wine." Friday arrived, and I couldn't shake the tension building in my chest. Mark's house was immaculate, a modern fortress of glass and steel with a manicured lawn that looked like it had been plucked from a magazine. Anna was dressed impeccably, her makeup subtle but flawless. She'd spent more time getting ready than usual, and I couldn't help but notice. Mark greeted us at the door with his trademark charm, his smile as polished as his shoes. "Welcome. Make yourselves at home," he said, ushering us inside. The interior of his house was just as impressive as the exterior. Sleek furniture, expensive artwork, and an open floor plan that screamed wealth. As we settled in, Mark poured drinks and launched into an animated conversation about his latest business venture. Anna seemed at ease, laughing at his jokes, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in a while. But I wasn't here to enjoy myself. My focus was on every detail, every glance, every touch, every word exchanged between them. And then it happened. As Mark handed Anna her glass of wine, his hand brushed against hers. It was a fleeting moment, so subtle it could have been innocent, but the way her cheeks flushed and how quickly she pulled her hand back told me it wasn't. "So, Mark," I said, cutting into the easy flow of conversation, "how do you manage to find time for all of this? Work, hobbies, helping the neighbors?" He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "Oh, I've learned to balance it all. Life's too short not to enjoy it, you know?" I forced a chuckle. I guess it helps when you've got people to share it with. Mark raised his glass slightly, his smile never wavering. Absolutely. Anna shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between us. You should see his wine collection, she said quickly, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. It's incredible. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. I'm sure it is. You seem to know a lot about it. She blinked, caught off guard for just a moment before recovering. Well, he showed me a few bottles last time I was here. I let the silence stretch, my gaze unwavering. Mark cleared his throat, his voice breaking the tension. Why don't we all take a look? I've got a bottle I think you'll really enjoy. He stood, and Anna quickly followed, her movements almost too eager. I trailed behind them, my mind racing. The way she'd tried to deflect, the nervous energy radiating from her. It was all adding up. As we descended into the dimly lit wine cellar, Mark launched into a detailed explanation of his collection, his voice smooth and practiced. But my focus wasn't on the bottles or the decor. It was on the fleeting glances between him and Anna, the silent communication they seemed to share. Then, as Mark bent to retrieve a bottle from the lower rack, I caught it, Anna's hand resting lightly on his shoulder for just a moment too long. My stomach churned, but I said nothing, waiting for the perfect moment to confront the truth. As we returned to the dining room, wine glasses in hand, I forced a smile and raised my glass. To good neighbors, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Mark smiled back, but his eyes flicked to Anna for the briefest of seconds. And in that glance, I saw everything I needed to know. The tension hung thick as the night wore on. Mark's charm didn't falter, and Anna played her part well, laughing at his stories and chiming in with details that suggested familiarity far deeper than mere neighborly acquaintance. I kept my focus sharp, watching for every slip, every unguarded moment that could reveal the truth. After dinner, Mark suggested we move to the living room for coffee and dessert. As he led the way, Anna lingered behind, pretending to adjust her bracelet. I stayed close, catching her by the elbow as Mark disappeared around the corner. You seem comfortable here, I said quietly, my voice low enough that only she could hear. Almost like you've done this before. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise. What's that supposed to mean? I shrugged, releasing her arm. Just an observation. Before she could respond, Mark's voice called out from the next room. Everything all right back there. Anna hurried forward without answering me, her steps quick and deliberate. I followed, my jaw tight as I pushed down the surge of anger threatening to rise. This wasn't the time for a confrontation. Not yet. In the living room, Mark had already set the coffee cups on the table, his movements effortless as if he were hosting old friends. I took a seat across from him, my eyes darting between him and Anna as she settled into a chair next to mine. So, how's work going for you, Mark? I asked, leaning back to appear casual. I hear logistics is a demanding field. He smiled, sipping his coffee. It is, but I've been doing it long enough to manage the stress. It's all about efficiency and knowing how to delegate. I imagine you delegate a lot, I said, letting a hint of sharpness creep into my tone. Must be nice having time to take care of other things. Mark's smile tightened for just a fraction of a second before he recovered. It's all about priorities. Speaking of which, I've got to show you my latest project. Anna, you've already seen it, but I think your husband will appreciate this. She looked startled, her cup clinking softly against its saucer. Oh, right. The new addition to the backyard. Mark rose, gesturing for me to follow him. Anna started to stand as well, but I waved her back down. You stay. I'll go take a look. Her hesitation was telling, but she didn't argue. I followed Mark through the sliding glass doors into the cool night air. His backyard was as impeccable as the rest of his property, complete with a pool, a fire pit, and a newly constructed gazebo. It's impressive, I said, my tone neutral as I stepped closer to the pool's edge. The water shimmered under the soft glow of the garden lights. Mark stood beside me, his hands in his pockets. Thanks. I like to keep busy. I turned to face him fully, my voice dropping. Is that why you've been so involved with Anna? Keeping busy? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. For the first time that evening, Mark's polished facade cracked. His smile faltered, and he took a step back, his expression unreadable. I'm not sure what you're implying, he said carefully. You're a smart guy, I replied, my voice cold. Figure it out, bot. Before he could respond, the sound of the sliding door opening made us both turn. Anna stood in the doorway, her face pale and tense. What's going on? She asked, her voice wavering. I didn't answer her. My eyes were locked on Mark, waiting to see what he'd do next. His silence spoke volumes. For the first time, he looked unsure, as though he hadn't planned for this moment. And in that instant, I knew I wasn't imagining things. The truth was right there, just waiting to be dragged into the light. Anna's voice cut through the silence, sharper now, tinged with alarm. What's going on out here? Mark recovered quickly, his polished demeanor snapping back into place. We were just talking about the gazebo, he said smoothly, gesturing toward the structure. I was explaining the construction process. Anna's eyes darted between us, her discomfort obvious. It's late, she said, her tone clipped. Maybe we should call it a night. I crossed my arms, my gaze fixed on her. In a rush to leave, Anna, I thought you enjoyed spending time here. Her face flushed, and she opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Mark stepped in, his voice calm but firm. There's no need for tension, folks. It's just a neighborly dinner. Neighborly. I shot back, the simmering anger I've been holding and finally boiling over. Is that what we're calling it now? Anna's expression twisted into something between anger and panic. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. What are you even accusing me of? I'm not accusing, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I'm observing. The messages, the looks, the little errands you keep running over here. It's all adding up, Anna. Mark held up his hands in a placating gesture. Let's not do this here. This isn't the time or place. I turned to him, my eyes narrowing. You don't get to decide that, Mark. Not after everything. Anna stepped between us, her voice trembling. Stop it, both of you. You're acting insane. No, I said, my voice low but firm. What's insane is pretending this is normal. Pretending I don't see what's right in front of me. Mark's jaw tightened, his mask slipping just enough to reveal a flicker of guilt. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away, her expression hardening. We're leaving, she said, grabbing my arm. I didn't move, my feet rooted to the ground. Not until we clear the air, I said, pulling away from her grip. You owe me that much. Mark stepped closer, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. This isn't the way to handle things. I turned on him, my anger finally breaking through. And how would you handle it, Mark? By pretending nothing's happening. By continuing to smile and act like you're doing us a favor. Anna's voice cracked as she interrupted. Stop! Just stop it! You're making something out of nothing! I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. You're right. It's nothing. Nothing honest. Nothing loyal. Nothing worth trusting. The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, Mark exhaled sharply and stepped back, his expression unreadable. I think you should both go. Anna looked at him, her face a mix of frustration and something else, something I couldn't place. Then she turned to me, her eyes blazing. Fine, let's go. As we walked to the car, the weight of the evening pressed down on me. Anna didn't say a word, her silence louder than any argument. But I wasn't done, not yet. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The drive home was suffocatingly quiet. Anna sat rigid in the passenger seat, her arms crossed tightly, staring out the window as if the passing streetlights held the answers she refused to give me. I kept my hands firm on the wheel, the tension coiled in my chest like a spring ready to snap. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she was out of the car before I could even kill the engine. I followed her into the house, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. She dropped her bag on the counter and spun around to face me, her eyes blazing. What the hell was that? She demanded. You tell me, I shot back, my voice sharp. How long has it been going on, Anna? How long have you been sneaking around with him? Her face twisted in anger, but there was a flicker of something else, fear. You're paranoid, she said, her voice shaking. Mark and I are friends. That's it. Friends. I barked out a bitter laugh. Do friends send each other messages like, can't wait to see you again? Do they brush hands like it's some romantic movie? Do they have secret little looks they think no one notices? She froze for a moment, her jaw tightening. You went through my phone. Don't turn this around on me, I snapped, stepping closer. You're the one who's been lying, Anna. You're the one who's been hiding things. I haven't done anything wrong, she shouted, her voice breaking. You're twisting everything, looking for something that isn't there. I stared at her, my chest heaving. Then look me in the eye and tell me you haven't been alone with him. Tell me he hasn't touched you. Tell me you don't feel anything for him. Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence was damning, cutting deeper than any confession. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter, her gaze darting away from mine. You can't, can you? I said, my voice low and filled with bitterness. Because it's true. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away, her expression hardening. You don't understand, she said quietly. Then make me understand, I demanded, my voice rising. Tell me what's really been going on. Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment I thought she might finally open up. But then she straightened, her jaw set, and shook her head. I'm done with this, she said, brushing past me. Believe whatever you want. I grabbed her arm, not hard, but firm enough to stop her. You don't get to walk away from this, Anna. Not without telling me the truth. She yanked her arm free, her eyes flashing. And what if the truth is something you don't want to hear? What then? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I stepped back, suddenly unsure. She turned and walked down the hallway, leaving me standing there in the kitchen, the weight of her question hanging in the air. What if the truth was worse than I could handle? What if it changed everything? But I couldn't back down now. The pieces were all there, scattered and incomplete, but the picture they painted was undeniable. And if she wouldn't tell me, I'd find out myself, one way or another. Anna's deflection only solidified my resolve. That night, as she locked herself in the bedroom, I stayed up in the living room, piecing together everything I had seen, heard, and felt. The messages, the glances, the lingering touches, all of it painted a picture too clear to ignore. By morning, I had a plan. If she wouldn't give me the truth, I'd get it from the only other person who could, Mark. I waited until Anna left the house for her yoga class, her usual Saturday routine. She didn't say goodbye, her silence screaming louder than words. The moment the door shut behind her, I grabbed my jacket and headed next door. Mark opened the door, his expression flickering with surprise before settling into his usual charm. Morning, neighbor. What can I do for you? I pushed past him into the house without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. He closed the door slowly, his smile fading. A boat. You know damn well what about, I said, my voice low and sharp. Ina, whatever's been going on between you two. Mark leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. I think you're misunderstanding things. No, Mark, I said, stepping closer. I think I'm finally starting to understand perfectly. He straightened, his demeanor shifting from casual to defensive. Look, I've helped Anna out, sure, but there's nothing more to it. Whatever you think is happening, it's not. I let out a bitter laugh. You're good, I'll give you that. The perfect neighbor. Always there to lend a hand. But you've overplayed your part, and now I'm calling you out. Mark's jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw cracks in his polished exterior. You're out of line, he said, his voice cool but edged with warning. And you're out of excuses, I shot back. I've seen the messages, the looks, the way she acts around you. You think I'm blind. He didn't respond immediately, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. Then, to my surprise, he let out a short, humorless laugh. Fine. You want the truth. Anna's unhappy. She's been unhappy for a long time. And maybe I stepped in where I shouldn't have, but I wasn't the cause of it. The admission hit me like a gut punch, but I didn't let it show. So you admit it? You crossed the line. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't supposed to be anything. A few conversations, sometimes spent together. I thought I was just helping her, but I guess it went further than I intended. I clenched my fists, my voice trembling with controlled rage. You thought you were helping her. By sneaking behind my back. Mark's gaze didn't waver, but there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes. I never wanted it to get to this point. But what's done is done. The words hung in the air like a death knell, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind me. Back in my house, the silence was deafening. Mark's confession replayed in my mind, each word slicing deeper than the last. He had admitted it, but his words only raised more questions. How far had it gone? How much of my life had been a lie? When Anna returned home, I was waiting for her. She froze when she saw me, her gym bag slipping from her shoulder. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice wary. I stood slowly, my eyes locked on hers. "I talked to Mark." Her face paled, her breath hitching. "You what? You heard me?" I said, my voice cold. "And he confirmed everything I needed to know." Her lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not of me, but of what I might do next. And for the first time, I didn't care. "Now it's your turn, Anna," I said, stepping closer. "Tell me the truth. All of it." Anna stared at me, her eyes wide and glassy. For a moment, I thought she might deny it again, spin another story to save herself. But then, she sagged against the wall, her breath escaping in a shaky exhale. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides. "Then tell me what did happen." "No more lies, Anna!" Her hands trembled as she ran them through her hair, her eyes avoiding mine. "It started small. Mark was just there. You were always busy with work, and he noticed things. Things you didn't." My stomach churned, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Noticed things? Like what?" She hesitated, her voice cracking as she continued. "Like how I was struggling to keep up with everything. How lonely I felt." He offered to help, and I let him. At first it was innocent, fixing things around the house, lending tools. But then, her voice trailed off, and she looked away, ashamed. "But then what?" I pressed, my voice rising. "How far did it go?" "Anna," her shoulders shook as tears streamed down her face. "We kissed. It was just once. I swear, it never went further than that." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. "You expect me to believe that? After everything I've seen, everything I've felt?" "It's the truth," she said, her voice pleading. "I felt terrible about it, and I ended it before it went any further. I didn't want to ruin what we have." "What we have?" I repeated, my voice laced with venom. "You already ruined it, Anna. The moment you let him into our lives, you made that choice." She sobbed, her face buried in her hands. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I love you. I never stopped loving you." The words hit me like a slap, but they didn't soften the rage burning inside me. "Love? You call this love? Lying, sneaking around, making me doubt everything we built together." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. The weight of her betrayal was too heavy, suffocating. "What happens now?" she asked through her tears, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, the truth cutting through the air like a blade. "But I'm not sure I can look at you the same way again." The room fell into a heavy silence, her cries the only sound. I turned away, my hands gripping the edge of the counter as I tried to steady myself. The truth was out, but it didn't bring the relief I had hoped for. If anything, it left me with a deeper, emptier void. The front door slammed, and I realized I couldn't stay here, not now. Not with her. Without a word, I grabbed my keys and left, the night swallowing me whole as I drove aimlessly, trying to escape the pain threatening to consume me. The house felt cold when I returned hours later, its silence pressing down like a physical weight. Anna was nowhere to be seen, and for a brief moment, I wondered if she had left. A part of me almost hoped she had. But her shoes were still by the door, her bag still slung over the chair in the kitchen. She was here, waiting, somewhere. I found her in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes were red, and she clutched a crumpled tissue in her hands. She didn't look up when I entered, and for a while I just stood there, the weight of the night pressing down on both of us. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, but they didn't soften the sharp edges of my anger and pain. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Anna!" "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "But I don't know what else to say. I made a mistake, a horrible, selfish mistake. And now I'm afraid I've lost you." I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me. The truth was, I didn't know if I could forgive her. The betrayal cut too deep, and the cracks in our relationship felt insurmountable. But as I stood there, watching her break under the weight of her guilt, another thought crept in. What did I want? Revenge. resolution. Or just to be free of this pain? You didn't lose me, Anna, I said finally, my voice low but steady. But you broke something between us. And I don't know if we can fix it. Her tears came again, silent and steady, but she nodded. I'll do anything, she said. Anything to make this right. I sat down across from her, my hands clasped tightly. It's not about what you can do, Anna. It's about trust. And right now, I don't know if I can trust you. She flinched as if the words physically hurt, but she didn't argue. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the enormity of the situation sinking in. I need time, I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. Time to figure out what this means for us. For me, Anna nodded, wiping at her face with the crumpled tissue. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. All I knew was that I needed space to breathe, to think, to process everything that had happened. Without another word, I stood and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. That night, as I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, I tried to imagine a future where this didn't haunt us. A future where I could forgive her, where we could rebuild what had been broken. But the images felt distant, out of reach. For now, all I had was the truth and the pain it carried. Whether we could move past it, only time would tell. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again.